Hey everyone, I just wanted to jump really quick on here to share with you some insight I believe God shared with me. And it's really a reminder just about how big God is. I know we say that a lot when somebody's in an uncomfortable season in their life to make them feel better about themselves. But this is something I really wanted to share just as a reminder that just when we feel like we might have an inch on who God is, He's so much bigger and better than what we think. So I really want you to go to First Kings chapter 19. I'm just gonna jump in at verse 11. This is God speaking to the prophet Elijah. Eliyahu, nice name. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So I'm just going to stop right there. Really, what I want to highlight is just everything Elijah experienced prior to God speaking with him. There was a great and powerful wind, and then there was an earthquake, and then after the earthquake, there was a fire. And what's interesting is the power and the scope of God and how He's able to speak and how He chooses to speak. But what's so powerful to me is that everything that happened prior to God speaking to Elijah, it's interesting because it notates specifically God was not in these things. He was not in the wind, he was not in the earthquake, and he was not in the fire. But if you study, the Israelites' history with God, they associated, these occurrences with God and His presence. If you skip back to Exodus 19, to God's presence on the mountain. It says, "Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God." In a prior video, and if I haven't made this video, I should make it, but just a little side note, the rabbis actually translated this as, "Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with the word of God." So that's interesting right there. I look at it as a Jesus Easter egg. But anyways, it says, "And they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai, or Har Sinai, was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently." So that's pretty interesting. So we have trembling, and there's fire. It looks like the whole mountain's on fire. I can't even imagine what that would look like. And so it would be interesting if Elijah saw all this and just assumed that God was there. I imagine, why it's notated, but the Lord was not in it. He probably sat there and stood in a way prostrate to hear from God. And it's just what looks like a natural occurrence. It's interesting because we would expect something that big, okay, God's got to be in it. And I feel like, God is someone that likes to show up in places that we may not think, or places we may not think to look. And so just because He spoke to maybe your family or your congregation or whoever you might know, just because He chose to speak to them in a certain way, it doesn't mean that and even if you were a recipient of that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should take that and run with it for the rest of your life as if God would never want to approach you in a new way or speak to you in a new way. Because you have to think about it in the context of a relationship. God is a very relational God. His relationship with us is compared to a marriage. Imagine if you were in a marriage and your spouse, or as I like to mispronounce to my friends, your spouse, imagine if they imagine if they did the exact same thing every single day. You knew it down to, you could tell what time they were going to say good morning, or they were going to call you. Like, everything was the same, nothing ever changed. It would probably be bothersome. And so I imagine God being a relational God. Just because we meet Him in a certain way, it doesn't mean that we'll never be reintroduced to Him in another way. What's interesting is, my final point is, if you go all the way to Revelation 19, let's see, I think it's verse 12, says, "His eyes," and this is talking about Jesus, His eyes are like blazing fire, and on his head are many crowns. He has a name written on him that no one knows but he himself. And so, a lot of us, sometimes maybe we feel special, because, we can call God, Yahweh or Elohim, or if you're really into Aramaic, Allah, or you can get to all the other specific names. Adonai Sidkenu, dang it, Adonai Mekadeshchem, Adonai Shalom. Let's see, there's so many names, but anyways, that stuff's cool. For someone that has a lifelong journey of studying Hebrew, I don't want to discredit that. But what's so interesting is there's a name that the Lord has that nobody knows but He Himself, and I take that to mean, God is so much bigger than what we perceive Him to be. Yeah, He might have said this in the last season, but God is always, He's bigger. He's always doing stuff behind the scenes. It's not just, God's not a cookie cutter formula. 1 + 1 will always be 2 with Him. Like I couldn't guarantee that, one season 1 + 1 might be 2, and another season of your life 1 + 1 might be 4,000, might be 67. Overall point is, God is so much bigger than what we think He is. So I hope you can rest and meditate on that, and I will catch you in the next one.